Let's talk about how to set up buttons with our visual scripting. So I have a hotbar in my game down here, which is just comprised of 5 buttons right now. And currently these are just default Unity UI buttons. So there's nothing special about them. It's just got all the default settings too. So as I mouse over them, they change color slightly. If I click on them, they get darker. And then when I release, they get lighter again. So they look like buttons, they feel like buttons, but they don't have any functionality on them yet. So the first thing about a button, which I created just by right-clicking and saying UI button, is that underneath it, it has a text. And the text of this button is whatever we want it to be. So this might be the first ability that I have, Fireball, right? And when I click this button, I want to launch a Fireball. I can adjust my font here, the font style, the font size. I could also use this best fit, which will sort of rescale it to the size of my button, or to make it fit as best I can. Now, on the button itself, I want this to sort of like notify my game that my Fireball button has been pressed, right? So let's take a look at this button component. First, we have colors on what it should look like when it's normal, highlighted, pressed, selected. And then I also have like a graphic that I can set here, so I can change what this thing looks like, right? I also have the image component up above, so I can change what this thing looks like here as well. And I can just pick any of the images that I have in my game, right? Maybe it's a game over button or this character, or, maybe I want it blue. Excellent. Okay, to hook up logic for when this thing actually gets clicked, you want to look in your button component. There's a section called on click. This is where you tell the button what to do or who to notify when this button has been pressed. So let's hook it up to the visual scripting that Unity has. So the first thing is, who do we want to tell, or which game object do we want to tell that this button has been pressed? Let's create a brand new game object here that I'm just going to call my game manager. Now, this is a pretty common thing to have inside of most game projects, is to sort of have this empty game manager object that's sort of just at position 000, and doesn't really do anything aside from overarching logic for the game itself. Your game manager object might do something like control the timers, or spawn enemies when needed, check if the win state or the failure states have been reached, respawn the player as needed. It probably does all that overarching logic that doesn't really feel like it belongs with like a single individual object inside Unity. So let's notify this that I've clicked this Fireball button. First, I'm going to set up a new visual scripting component on this. So I'm going to go visual scripting, I'm going to go script machine. I'm going to create a new one, and I'm just going to call it Game Manager. So now I have this new graph called Game Manager, and it's just got this start and update. Now to hook up a button to this, I'm going to use a new unit called Unity Event. And the Unity event looks like this. You can also find it if you go to Add Unit and you go under Events. It's in here under Unity Event. And we're going to name this something. Fireball clicked. Right? Okay, so we have this new event here called Fireball clicked, and we want our button to connect to it. Let's close out of our graph. On our button component itself, we're going to go back down to that section that says on click. I'm going to hit this plus, and it's going to say, which object do I want to notify? Well, I want to notify the game manager. So I'm going to grab the game manager, I'm going to drag it in and hook it up here. On the game manager, how do we want to notify it? What do we want to execute? Well, we want to, on the flow machine, right, which is the visual scripting graph that it has, we want to trigger a Unity event, this one here. And this final field is asking for, well, which Unity event do you want to trigger? I want to trigger Fireball clicked. Now that I have this set up to talk to my game manager object, to trigger a Unity event, and to trigger one called Fireball clicked, back here in my game manager, this Unity event will be executed when that button has been pressed. Just to show that it's working, let's do something like just a very quick and simple debug log. And let's say Fireball, I should be adding a string literal. And we'll say fireball button clicked. I'm going to connect my string literal to that as my message and hook this up. So when I click the fireball button, it will execute the logic here. It'll do a debug log, which will just show up in my Unity console, and it will print fireball button clicked. So we should see it show up in this console window down here. Let's go test it. Excellent. So now when I click it, the on-click on my button is telling the game manager object to execute the fireball clicked Unity event in that script, in my visual script. In here, I have the fireball clicked Unity event, and it's executing this and printing fireball button clicked. And we're seeing that output here in the log. If you have something like different abilities, different actions that you want your player to take, different options that they're clicking on, this is exactly how you would set it up.